I can't do this anymore, these clippers are completely broken, Marcus Thompson whispered to himself as he stared at the ancient wall clippers that had been faithfully cutting hair in his barbershop for over 3 decades. The 58-year-old barber had built his entire reputation on precision and consistency, but now, on the most important day of the year, his trusted tools were failing him. In less than 18 hours, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would be sitting in his chair for their traditional pre-playoff haircut, a ritual that had become as sacred to Shai's game preparation as his shooting routine. What Marcus didn't know was that his decision to use those broken clippers anyway would accidentally create the most elaborate superstition in NBA history, transform his small neighborhood barbershop into a pilgrimage site for professional athletes, and prove that sometimes our greatest limitations become our most powerful advantages. But to understand how broken barber equipment became the foundation of championship mentality, we need to start at the beginning of this unlikely partnership. 4 years earlier, when a young NBA player first walked into Marcus's shop looking for more than just a haircut. The date was October 12, 2020, and Marcus Thompson was having one of the slowest days in his barbershop's history. The COVID-19 pandemic had decimated his business, reducing his daily customers from 15 to maybe 3 or 4 on a good day. At 54 years old, Marcus had been cutting hair for 30 years, building a loyal clientele in Oklahoma City's northeast neighborhood, but now he was genuinely worried about keeping his doors open. That afternoon, a tall, athletic young man walked through the door, immediately recognizable as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the Thunder's promising second-year player who had just been traded from the Los Angeles Clippers. "Excuse me, sir," Shai said politely. "I'm new to the city and I'm looking for a barber who can give me a really precise fade. My teammate Josh Giddey said you might be able to help me out." Marcus was surprised that an NBA player had chosen his modest shop over the upscale salons that typically catered to professional athletes, but he was also grateful for the business during such difficult times. "Of course, young man. I've been cutting hair since before you were born. What kind of fade are you looking for?" What happened during that first haircut would establish the foundation for what would eventually become the most talked about pre-game ritual in professional basketball. As Marcus began cutting Shai's hair, he noticed something unusual about his new customer. Unlike most young athletes who wanted to chat about basketball, parties, or cars, Shai was asking detailed questions about Marcus's technique, the precision of his cuts, and the consistency of his results. "Mr. Thompson, how do you make sure every haircut looks exactly the same?" Shai asked as Marcus worked on his fade. "Well, it's all about routine and attention to detail," Marcus explained, carefully measuring the length with his comb. "I use the same techniques, the same tools, and the same approach every single time. Consistency comes from treating every haircut like it's the most important one you've ever done." Shai nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly how I approach basketball. Every shot has to have the same form, every dribble has to be controlled the same way. Consistency is everything in performance." Marcus was impressed by Shai's maturity and focus. Most 22-year-old athletes were more concerned with looking flashy than understanding the fundamentals of excellence. "You know what, Shai? I can tell you're going to be special. You understand that success comes from doing ordinary things extraordinarily well, every single time." When Marcus finished the haircut, Shai examined his reflection carefully, checking every angle and line with the attention to detail of a craftsman inspecting his own work. "This is perfect, Mr. Thompson. Absolutely perfect. I want to book my next appointment right now." But what Shai said next would begin the transformation of routine haircuts into sacred ritual. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask you a favor. I want you to cut my hair exactly like this before every important game. Same technique, same timing, same conversation. I believe that consistency in preparation leads to consistency in performance." Marcus agreed, and over the next several months, Shai became a regular customer, scheduling haircuts before every home game and sometimes even before road trips when the timing allowed. However, it wasn't until the Thunder's first playoff appearance in 2021 that their routine evolved into something much more meaningful and elaborate. Before Game 1 of the 2021 playoffs against the Portland Trail Blazers, Shai arrived at Marcus's shop with a specific request that would change everything. "Mr. Thompson, I've been thinking about this playoff run, and I want to establish something special. I want you to cut my hair exactly 18 hours before every playoff game. Not 17 hours, not 20 hours, exactly 18 hours. And I want us to have the same conversation every time about precision, consistency, and doing ordinary things extraordinarily well." Marcus was intrigued by Shai's specificity but also touched by the young man's trust in their partnership. "Shai, why 18 hours specifically?" Because that gives me time to go home, review film, get a good night's sleep, and wake up feeling like everything is exactly as it should be. The haircut is the first step in my game preparation, and everything else builds from there." Marcus agreed to this arrangement, and before Game 1 he gave Shai what they both considered to be the perfect pre-playoff haircut. The Thunder lost the series, but Shai's individual performance was exceptional, and he attributed part of his focus to the consistency of his preparation routine. But what happened before the 2022 playoffs would demonstrate how their ritual was evolving into something that affected not just Shai, but the entire team's approach to preparation and mental focus. Before the 2022 playoff series against the Phoenix Suns, other Thunder players began asking about Shai's pregame haircut routine and whether Marcus could accommodate similar arrangements for them. "Shai keeps talking about how his haircut helps him feel prepared and focused," Josh Giddey told Marcus during a regular season appointment. "Is there something special about the way you cut hair before big games?" Marcus thought carefully about how to answer. He didn't want to oversell the importance of haircuts, but he also recognized that the ritual had genuine value for Shai's mental preparation. "Josh, it's not magic. It's about creating a routine that reinforces the mindset you want to have. When Shai sits in that chair, we talk about precision, consistency, and attention to detail. The haircut becomes a physical reminder of those values." Josh requested his own pre-playoff haircut routine, and soon other players were scheduling appointments at Marcus's shop before important games. The barbershop became an unofficial team meeting space where players discussed mental preparation, shared advice about handling pressure, and reinforced their commitment to excellence through attention to detail. However, what happened during the 2023 playoffs would test whether their elaborate routines were genuinely helpful or just elaborate superstitions. The Thunder had their best playoff run in years, advancing to the Western Conference Finals, and Marcus's shop became increasingly busy with player appointments, media attention, and fans hoping to experience the magic of the Thunder's secret preparation ritual. "This is getting out of hand," Marcus told his wife one evening after a particularly hectic day. "I've got reporters calling, fans showing up hoping to see players, and appointment requests from athletes in other sports. I'm not sure this is what Shai and I intended when we started our simple routine." But what happened before Game 6 of the Western Conference Finals would remind Marcus why their ritual had developed in the first place, and how it had genuinely helped these young men develop mental toughness and consistency under pressure. Shai arrived for his usual pregame haircut, but instead of his typical calm demeanor, he seemed anxious and distracted. "Mr. Thompson, I'm nervous about tomorrow night. This is the biggest game of my career and I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong." Marcus had seen this kind of pregame anxiety before, and he knew that their routine could serve a purpose beyond just haircuts. It could provide stability and confidence when everything else felt uncertain. "Shai, let's talk about what we always talk about. Tell me about precision." As Marcus began cutting Shai's hair with his usual meticulous technique, they discussed the importance of focusing on process rather than outcomes, controlling what could be controlled, and trusting in preparation rather than worrying about results. "Every cut I make has to be perfect," Marcus said as he worked. "I can't think about whether you'll win or lose tomorrow. I can only focus on doing my job with complete precision and trusting that good preparation leads to good performance." By the time the haircut was finished, Shai's anxiety had been replaced by calm confidence. "Mr. Thompson, you're right. I can't control whether shots go in, but I can control my preparation, my effort, and my focus. Thank you for reminding me what really matters." The Thunder won Game 6 that night, with Shai playing one of the best games of his career. In his post-game interview, he mentioned the importance of his preparation routine and how it helped him stay grounded when pressure mounted. But what would have happened if Marcus's Clippers had been working perfectly on April 19, 2024? We'll never know, because the equipment failure that seemed like a disaster became the catalyst for the most meaningful evolution of their ritual yet. Let me take you back to that morning when everything changed. Marcus stood in his barbershop at 6:47 a.m., examining his faithful wall clippers that had been with him since 1992. The cord was fraying badly, the motor sputtered inconsistently, and the blade alignment was noticeably off. Under normal circumstances, Marcus would immediately head to the equipment store for replacements. But this was April 19, 2024, and in less than 30 hours, the Thunder would face the Dallas Mavericks in Game 1 of the playoffs. Shai's appointment was scheduled for 3 p.m. that afternoon, exactly 18 hours before tip-off, just as it had been for every playoff game over the past 4 years. Marcus knew that Shai's mental preparation depended on consistency and routine. Any deviation from their established ritual could potentially affect his confidence and focus. I can't let him down, Marcus said to himself as he tested the clippers again. These clippers have been with me through everything. We've never failed a customer and we're not starting now. Instead of panicking or rescheduling, Marcus spent the next 3 hours developing a technique that would compensate for his equipment's limitations. He practiced on his own hair, learning to work with the irregular motor patterns and adjusting his cutting angles to account for the misaligned blades. The process was frustrating and time-consuming, but it also forced Marcus to approach his craft with renewed attention and intention. You know what? He said to the malfunctioning clippers, maybe struggling a little bit will make both of us better. But what happened when Shai arrived for his appointment would transform their understanding of what their ritual was really about. At exactly 3 p.m., Shai walked through the door with his usual pregame energy, focused but relaxed, confident but not cocky. He settled into the familiar chair and closed his eyes for his traditional 5-minute meditation while Marcus prepared his tools. When Marcus turned on the clippers, they immediately began their irregular sputtering. The sound was noticeably different from their usual smooth hum, and Marcus tensed, waiting for Shai's reaction. Instead of concern or frustration, Shai smiled without opening his eyes. Those clippers sound like they're working harder today, Mr. Thompson. Marcus was surprised by Shai's calm response. I'm sorry about the noise, Shai. The equipment is getting old, but I promise I can still give you the same quality cut. Shai opened his eyes and looked at Marcus in the mirror. Mr. Thompson, you know what's interesting? Sometimes when things don't come easily, we end up paying more attention and doing better work. This observation would prove to be more profound than either man realized at the time. As Marcus began cutting Shai's hair using his adapted technique, the irregular clippers forced him to be more deliberate, more patient, and more mindful with each stroke. Instead of relying on smooth, automatic movements, he had to actively compensate for the equipment's struggles. You're taking your time today, Shai observed. It feels different. The clippers are making me work harder, Marcus admitted. I have to focus more intensely on each cut because I can't just rely on muscle memory. Shai was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Mr. Thompson, I think that's exactly what I need to hear before tomorrow's game. When things get difficult, instead of getting frustrated, I need to get more focused. Their conversation continued as Marcus worked, and they discussed how challenges could become opportunities for elevated attention and performance, rather than obstacles to success. When the haircut was finished, both men looked at the result in the mirror. It was flawless, perhaps the most precise and carefully crafted haircut Marcus had ever given. This is incredible, Shai said, examining his reflection. I don't know what you did differently, but this feels like the perfect preparation for tomorrow. Marcus was proud of his work, but he was also honest about the circumstances. Shai, I have to tell you, my clippers are malfunctioning. What you heard today was me working around equipment problems. I was worried it would affect the quality, but somehow it made me focus more intensely on every detail. What Shai said next would establish a new tradition that would become legendary among professional athletes. Mr. Thompson, I want you to use those same struggling clippers for every playoff game this season. Don't fix them. Don't replace them. The sound, the extra effort, the heightened attention they require, I think that's going to be part of our playoff energy. Marcus was surprised by this request. You want me to keep using broken equipment because it made me work harder? I want you to keep using equipment that reminds both of us that excellence comes from how we respond to challenges, not from having everything be easy. This conversation established what would become known throughout the NBA as the broken clipper philosophy, a mindset about turning limitations into advantages and using difficulties as catalysts for elevated performance. But what happened the next day would prove that Shai's instinct about the struggling clippers was more than just psychological placebo. The Thunder dominated the Mavericks 127-102 in Game 1, with Shai scoring 31 points, dishing out 8 assists, and shooting an incredible 12 of 18 from the field. His performance was characterized by exceptional decision-making, clutch shooting, and the kind of focused intensity that elevated his entire team's energy. After the game, reporters asked Shai about his outstanding performance and mental preparation. Yesterday's haircut felt different, Shai explained. My barber had to work with equipment that wasn't perfect, but instead of getting frustrated, he approached it with extra care and intention. It reminded me that when things get difficult, we have the choice to get discouraged or to get more focused. I chose focus. When Marcus watched Shai's post-game interview, he realized that their conversation about struggling clippers had become integrated into Shai's mental approach to handling adversity on the basketball court. However, what happened before Game 2 would demonstrate how quickly a meaningful coincidence could evolve into an elaborate team-wide philosophy. 2 days later, Shai returned for his pre-Game 2 haircut, but this time he brought specific instructions that would formalize their new approach. Mr. Thompson, I've been thinking about our conversation and how those struggling Clippers made both of us more intentional. I want to make this part of our official playoff routine. Shai outlined his vision. I want you to use those same Clippers for every playoff game, and I want us to have conversations about how challenges can make us better. Not exactly the same words every time, but the same theme, discussing how difficulties can elevate our focus and performance instead of derailing them. Marcus agreed, and their pre-Game 2 ritual followed the new format. They used the malfunctioning Clippers, discussed how obstacles could become opportunities for growth, and Shai left with both a precise haircut and a reinforced mindset about facing adversity with elevated attention. The Thunder won Game 2 116-109, with Shai contributing 28 points and 6 assists while demonstrating exceptional composure in clutch moments. But what happened when other Thunder players learned about the broken Clipper philosophy would transform Marcus's barbershop into the unofficial headquarters of team mental preparation. Before Game 3, Josh Giddey approached Marcus with an unusual request. Mr. Thompson, Shai keeps talking about how those struggling Clippers help him think about challenges differently. Could I get a haircut with the same equipment and have the same kind of conversation? Marcus was willing to accommodate the request, but he wanted to make sure Josh understood the real purpose behind the ritual. Josh, the value isn't in the Clippers themselves. It's in the mindset they represent, approaching difficulties with increased focus and intention rather than frustration. Josh agreed, and Marcus gave him a haircut using the malfunctioning Clippers while they discussed how basketball challenges could be approached with the same heightened attention that struggling equipment demanded. When the Clippers don't work smoothly, I have to be more present and deliberate, Marcus explained as he worked. When you face defensive pressure or shooting struggles, you can respond the same way, with more focus, not more stress. By Game 4, 5 Thunder players were requesting broken Clipper haircuts, and Marcus's shop had become a gathering place where teammates reinforced their shared philosophy about turning challenges into opportunities for excellence. But what happened when the local media discovered the Thunder's unusual preparation ritual would bring national attention to both the team's mental approach and Marcus's neighborhood barbershop? Sports reporter Jennifer Martinez was investigating the Thunder's impressive playoff composure when she learned about the team's visits to Marcus's shop and the philosophy surrounding the malfunctioning Clippers. I've covered the NBA for 15 years, and I've never heard of a team building their mental preparation around broken equipment, Jennifer told Marcus during an interview. Can you explain how struggling Clippers became part of professional basketball psychology? Marcus was thoughtful in his response, wanting to accurately represent the meaning without overselling the importance. It started as an equipment problem that we turned into an opportunity for better focus. When my Clippers struggle, I have to pay more attention and work more deliberately. That creates an environment where we naturally talk about how challenges can make us better if we respond with increased intention rather than frustration. Jennifer's article about the Thunder's broken Clipper philosophy was published nationally and quickly gained widespread attention. ESPN, The Athletic, and Sports Illustrated all picked up the story, and suddenly Marcus's barbershop was being discussed on sports talk shows across the country. This is either the most meaningful team tradition in professional sports or the most elaborate superstition I've ever encountered, one ESPN commentator said during a segment about unusual playoff rituals. But for Marcus and the Thunder players, the media attention was secondary to the genuine impact the ritual was having on their mental preparation and team chemistry. However, what happened when Marcus's ancient Clippers finally died completely would test whether their philosophy was about the equipment or the mindset it represented. Before Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, Marcus arrived at his shop to find that his 32-year-old Clippers had finally given up completely. The motor was dead, the cord had frayed beyond repair, and no amount of adjustment or prayer could bring them back to life. Marcus immediately called Shai to explain the situation and discuss alternatives. Shai, the Clippers are completely done. I can buy new ones, you can go to another barber, or we can skip the haircut altogether. I don't want to mess with your preparation. Shai's response revealed how deeply he had internalized the lesson that the Clippers had been teaching. Mr. Thompson, the Clippers were never the point. The point was learning to approach challenges with increased focus and intention. Tonight's challenge is getting my playoff haircut without our usual tools. That sounds like the perfect test of whether we've really learned what those Clippers were trying to teach us. Shai arrived at the barbershop that evening to find Marcus had prepared a completely different cutting setup. Instead of electric clippers, he would use scissors and a straight razor, tools that required even more precision, patience, and skill than the struggling clippers ever had. "This is the ultimate version of our philosophy," Marcus explained as he began cutting Shai's hair with slow, deliberate strokes. No electric assistance, no shortcuts, just pure technique and absolute focus. The haircut took twice as long as usual, but their conversation was the most meaningful they had ever shared. They discussed not just basketball challenges but life challenges, the importance of adapting when circumstances change, and the difference between relying on tools versus relying on skill and mindset. "Mr. Thompson, I think this is what those broken clippers were preparing us for," Shai said as Marcus worked with masterful precision. "They taught us that excellence isn't about having perfect conditions. It's about bringing perfect attention to whatever conditions we face." When Marcus finished, Shai looked at his reflection with deep satisfaction. "This is the best haircut you've ever given me. And I think it's because we finally understand that the struggle was never about the clippers. It was about how we choose to respond when things don't go according to plan." The Thunder won Game 7 that night 112-105, advancing to the NBA Finals for the first time since 2012. Shai scored 35 points and played what many considered the best game of his career, displaying the kind of focus, composure, and attention to detail that had become his signature during their Clipper ritual journey. After the victory, Shai found Marcus in the crowd and embraced him with genuine emotion. "We did it, Mr. Thompson. And we did it by learning that greatness comes from how we handle difficulties, not from avoiding them." The story of Marcus's broken clippers and their evolution into a team philosophy became one of the most discussed narratives of that playoff run. Sports psychologists analyzed the approach, other teams inquired about implementing similar strategies, and Marcus received interview requests from around the world. But for Marcus, the real reward was seeing how a simple equipment malfunction had helped professional athletes develop a deeper understanding of resilience, intentional focus, and the power of choosing elevated attention over frustration when facing challenges. 6 months later, Marcus opened a second barbershop location to handle the increased business, but he kept his original shop exactly as it was, including a display case containing the broken clippers that had accidentally taught an NBA team about turning limitations into advantages. On the wall next to the display case, Marcus hung a framed quote from Shai: "Excellence isn't about having perfect tools. It's about bringing perfect attention to whatever tools you have." And every day, as Marcus cut hair with his new, properly functioning equipment, he remembered the most important lesson that his broken clippers had taught him: that sometimes our limitations force us to discover capabilities we never knew we possessed, and that the most meaningful growth often comes from the courage to continue working at our highest level even when everything isn't going according to plan. The barber who cut Shai's hair before every playoff game had discovered that his most valuable tool wasn't his clippers. It was his willingness to approach every challenge with increased focus, patience, and care. And in teaching that lesson to a professional basketball team, Marcus had proven that excellence comes not from perfect conditions, but from perfect attention to whatever conditions we face. Years later, when young barbers asked Marcus for advice about building a successful career, he would always tell them the same thing: take care of your equipment, but don't depend on it. Your real tools are your focus, your patience, and your willingness to work harder when things get difficult. Those tools never break down, they only get stronger with use.